Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Proof Beyond Reason. This is Geology.
J-Mo. Bum, ba, ba. Mike the Baptist.
So, how are you guys doing today?
We're all right,
Good,
man.
good.
We're all right, busy. Been very busy.
You got a shout out today, Mike?
I don't have a shout out of the week. Shout out to everyone who's listening. Love you guys. Thank you so much for continuing to support Proof Beyond Reason. If you want to be a sponsor, if you want to dialogue with us, hit us up at proofbeyondreason@gmail.com. Our Facebook page, send us a message, Instagram, YouTube, whatever avenue you want to hit us up on. We also can be heard on SoundCloud, iTunes. So please share that information. Get the word out so people can listen.
I actually have a shout out.
Yes.
If you guys, this kind of series kind of touched my life. It's basically you can find it on YouTube. I think he has different sources. I don't know the exact name of the person that makes it. I know that he's Scottish. He has the ill voice. It sounds so cool when you're watching these videos. But it's called the Fuel Project. Bible believer, gives complete Bible references. He has more than one different. When you go on YouTube and you go into his profile, he has different things. There's one on the Book of Revelation where he breaks down Revelation. I've seen this 3 times because I don't know about you, but Revelation was really symbolic and very hard to understand. So this guy helped me understand like the Book of Revelation. But then he also has other ones on knowing the enemy. So it goes into the origins of Adam and Eve all the way to kind of what we're going to be talking about today to of Babylon and then also the future and the Antichrist and stuff like that. So
That's so.
if you got time, and you can take it at your own pace because there are 10-minute videos, but there's 77 of the videos. So, but you could take your time,
Yeah,
10 minute at a time. So
What's it
shout
called
out.
again?
It's called the Fuel Project. He has 2 series that I've particularly seen. The first one is Know Your Enemy, and the second one is Revelation, which is an in-depth study. So dope guy. And I just encourage everybody to check that out.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, John is famous for sending me links to very lengthy video series. So he always says something like, "Yeah, man, you gotta check it out. It's only 90 hours worth." And I'm like, "Bro, 90 hours?" He's like, "Yeah, I've seen it 4 times or whatever." No, but it sounds like really good stuff. We're gonna play a clip later on in the show, and but today we're gonna be diving into Babylon. So last week, when we were discussing, G pulled out of left wing. He just came out of nowhere. It was like, boom, there's these tablets from Babylon. It predates most of the scriptures, so on and so forth, and kind of threw us through a loop when it came to what the story entailed. So after the episode, we decided, you know what, we're going to tackle this topic of Babylon and see what we come up with. And I got to read the story that you referenced, so the story that talks about the resurrection, the supposed resurrection in 3 days, dead, the sprinkling of all that, and there's not like a direct tie to Christ, in that way. It is a completely different reference. One is mythology, one is historical, but in reading it, I can see where people would say, yeah, there's a definite merge, and it makes sense why that's the case. So Babylon today, talking about it. I'm going to start here. I'm using the Ancient History Encyclopedia found on ancient.edu, description that they give on Babylon. And it says Babylon is the most famous city from ancient Mesopotamia, whose ruins lie in modern-day Iraq, 59 miles southwest of Baghdad. The name is thought to derive from, I'm not going to even read that, which is meant to say Gate of God or Gate of the Gods. And this city owes its fame to many references the Bible makes of it, which all are unfavorable. In the book of Genesis, chapter 11, Babylon is featured in the story of the Tower of Babel, and the name Babel actually translates to mean confusion. That's the actual translation in Hebrew. And so keep going. Babylon also appears predominantly in biblical books such as Daniel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and many others, most notably the book of Revelation, and so on and so forth. So we'll get into a lot of those things today. And as I continue to scroll down and the information is provided on the website, it says, outside of the sinful reputation given it by the Bible, the city is known for its impressive walls and buildings, its reputation as a great seat of learning and culture, the formation of code of law, which predates the Mosaic law, and for the hanging gardens of Babylon, which were man-made terraces of flora and fauna, watered by machinery, which were cited by Herodotus as one of the seven wonders of the world. So Babylon being a real place, Babylon being a major influence in world culture at large. And I think it is pretty interesting that when we look at the story of Babylon being this evil, seemingly evil, sinful, horrid, pagan place, and then you have God's people. You have Israel,
Yeah.
and
I think it was
you have this kind of like battle between two countries, two cities, two major influences in the world.
Yeah, so from what I understand, I know like you have Babel from like the Tower of Babel, but then there's like this point in the Bible where God cleanses the world, the flood, and then there's Babylon, which is more of like an empire. It's more than his Nineveh was in there, but the location's very interesting to me when I was doing some research. It's in like in the Bible where it describes the Garden of Adam and Eve, the garden, and because of sin entering the world, God basically closes those type of gates to the garden. But it says it's in between like the Euphrates River, and it puts it in that general region.
Correct.
So it's kind of interesting that Babylon, which comes from, and he's probably going to describe a little bit more, but from the lineage of Noah, there's like a rebirth, a restarting of like nations, and then out of those people come this guy named Ham, which is lineage of Noah, and this guy named Nimrod, and G's probably gonna go real in depth in that, but this guy is kind of like the founding father of this type of empire, you know. And it's so crazy that out of all the places he chooses to build this empire, it's probably in that exact location of Adam and Eve in the fall. So it's not a coincidence in my opinion, but it's interesting that he chooses to bring it back to that location. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and you know, um, the thing that kind of intrigued me about just reciting and thinking about Babylon is, um, whenever there's an enemy of God, some kind of enemy of God, there's a duplication, there's a mimicking of what he's doing, what he's building, and if Satan himself is spoken of as kind of that equivalent or that representative of Nimrod, right? Then then it would make sense that there would be a duplicate. There would be a duplicate nation. There would be duplicate initiatives. I remember one time we were talking, and you had said something like that it has to be a copy. So things like speaking in tongues, right? If the church speaks in tongues, speaking in tongues also has to exist in the demonic realm as well, because it must be a copy. You said also once the same thing with scriptures. If you have the Holy Scriptures, you must have a duplication. You must have a way to duplicate what God is doing. And if Satan had the position, as Lucifer that we understand him to have, then there's insight that he has that we don't have, that he has. He clearly understands the path or the plan of salvation for man. Like he knows it. He attacks it. He He went after Jesus, knowing, understanding what that looks like, but not being able to do much against it, but trying everything he can to go against it. A nation, the languages, the power, the just replication, something to duplicate. But I'm gonna do it first,
Yep.
so that it looks like you're making a copy. So I'm gonna be the first to move on it, and then when you do it, the people are gonna be deceived and they're gonna think that it was you're copying off of me, or you're copying off of what we're doing. So you're gonna be seen as false.
I see him as not being the leader in a sense because Satan tried to stop the birth of Jesus, right? But then he couldn't. And then now he's like, okay, I got to deal with it. So
Yeah.
it's his not leading. He's kind of reacting rather than
Right, but
You
when
know?
you look at the from the human standpoint, as far as documentation is concerned,
Oh,
that's what
yeah,
I mean.
yeah, yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
It,
good point.
It would be a genius
You're
to say,
right,
you know
you're
what,
right.
I'm gonna put this to paper first.
Right, right.
Mhm.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yes, it would be the other way around. But from the human standpoint, we would look at it and say, well, from this documentary support, this story aligns with this story, so you must have copied off of him because we're
Yeah.
using human reasoning. But when we dig deeper, and I have some other opinions on that. But what do you got, G?
All right, I'm gonna start off with 3 quotes. That's a little bit weird.
Let me pull this way because I don't know why I feel like
Is it affecting?
I'm getting some kind of feedback.
Yeah.
That's
All
all
right. So I'm gonna start off with 3 quotes. First one is gonna be from a Dr. Clarence Larkin from his book Dispensational Truth. It says Babel or Babylon was built by Nimrod. Genesis 10 verse 8 through 10. It was the seat of great apostasy. Here the Babylonian cult was invented, a system claimed to possess the highest wisdom and to reveal the divinest secrets. And then we go on to the next quote, which says Babylon the Great is the secret name. It is telling us that Babylon the Great refers to a religious system, which is referred by John Hampton Keithley III from the description of religious Babylon. And then we're going to go on to the last quote, which I'll talk about. And it says, in ancient days, Satan seemed to make Babylon the capital of his evil operation. From this headquarter was started all false religions.
Mm.
So, in the whole occultic, or from what scholars have found studying Babylon, Babylon was not seen as an empire. Babylon was seen more as a religious system, a thought process, or a way of the founding of all religions.
That's interesting. So it wasn't a group of people, but it was like a group of people that were like a insider cultish.
It was like an
Way of
insider
thinking.
cultish, correct? Yes.
Whoa, that's
So you
crazy.
had Nimrod. Nimrod was considered by 3 names at the time. You had Nimrod, which was just the king himself that developed the whole system.
The actual king.
The actual
Okay,
king, yes.
okay.
He was known as Nimrod, the man of renown.
Yeah,
We
in
know.
the Bible, he's actually the first king mentioned.
Yep.
So other than Jesus, that it doesn't come on the scene until later, but he's literally could have been the very first king.
The actual like king of an empire type of king, or symbolic king?
Symbolic king.
Okay, we're talking
Because
symbolic king.
before you had Babylon, you still had the Assyrian Empire. When the Assyrian Empire fell, that's when Babylon started forming up. So that's why we have all the Sumerian texts and all that stuff forming up. You have all the codes, all the laws coming up into play because he started developing a system where people became organized. So you had the Tower of Babel. A lot of people think the Tower of Babel is, in a way, a building, but the Tower of Babel is not, in a sense, a building. We talked about it last week. It's more of a collective.
So it's almost like
Gathering
a
of
shadow, not like shadow government, shadow empire of a way of thinking or something.
It wasn't a shadow. It was more so coming all together. Like he saw that the people were separated, so instead he wanted to unite and develop this one system. But in his thinking, Nimrod believed himself to be descended directly from the god, which in their belief was Enlil, which is Enlil. And from that you have his version, which was he's known as Nimrod. He's known as Marduk. Marduk basically is the reincarnated version of what Ishtar said when he died, what we talked about for the Easter. So you had Easter, you had also December 25th, which was the birth of Nimrod. So that's where you get your earliest versions of Christmas, the winter solstice, that started coming into play with paganism. that a lot of different religions started saying that, oh, it's a copycat. Well, Christianity is a copycat of that, but it's only because December 25th, you had Nimrod.
Right.
And then, of course, you have his infamous name, which is Dagon, which, if you
I've heard
translate
it.
Dagon, is dragon or man of renown.
Something with the fish, right? Fish king or something.
Fish King as well. That's where you have a lot of people saying that the fish that you see in the bumper stickers, fishes that you see in the car,
Or
it's basically
Starbucks, right?
basically
kind of
yes.
stuff.
It's like copycat. And I mean, you can track down even for Babylon, Starbucks, that's supposed to be a representation of Ishtar,
Mm.
which a lot of people don't know as well. But like we were saying, or what we said before during Easter, Babylon is the foundation of everything. So you have this religious system, not necessarily an empire, even though it was an empire at the time.
Right, because you had kings like Nebuchadnezzar and so
Exactly.
forth who were rulers of that nation that encompassed other nations as well. So it was if you want to picture Babylon for the people who are listening, you're thinking of the Roman Empire had rule over a certain geographic proximity that included other countries or other people, but Roman Empire had the king of kings essentially. So you could kind of mimic that and say Babylon had a king of kings sort of thing
Hmm.
when it comes to that. So
But everything came into play because not necessarily Nimrod from the beginning knew his system was not necessarily to give worship to himself. It was to give worship to the deity that he actually worshipped at the time. Which I'll read a quote from Alexander Hislop. He wrote The Two Babylons, and this is in the Second American Edition on page 5 and 24. So it says, the Tower of Babel was actually the worship of Satan, in the form of fire, the sun, and the serpent. However, Satan worship could not be done openly because of the many who still believed in the true God of Noah. So a mystery religion began at Babel where Satan could be worshipped in secret.
So the mysteries. That's kind of where you hear the.
That's where you see
mysteries.
Jewish Gnosticism or Jewish mysticism, where you have the Kabbalah, alchemy. That's where those started to stem from. Or the Egyptian religions at the time. There are many forms of magic at the time.
So those practitioners would be kind of a shadow within the not government, but within like society. They would be the shadow of, like, you know what I mean? Like they would be with you, but not with you.
Correct. Yes,
Hmm.
they'll still be the ones that give counsel because then like take for example in Egyptian towers where you had the pharaoh and he had his priests, or but the priests at the time were still known as magicians,
Hmm.
so they even studied their own form of art. Or
It's interesting that
that is
the
interesting.
definition that you gave was that those type of people were great builders and the something about the knowledge, right?
Yeah. So yeah, just to get the thought clear
Mhm.
from the Ancient Encyclopedia, ancient.edu. It says these people were. Yeah, it says city known for impressive walls and buildings, its reputation as great seats of learning and culture, the formation of a code of law which predates the Mosaic law, and the hanging gardens of Babylon, which are man-made terraces, which would be seen as one of the seven wonders of the world, one of the seven ancient wonders of the world, not necessarily existing
Wow.
wonders of the world.
and I mean going back to what you were saying though, the meaning of Babylon or what they can translate it to is gate of the gods. Because what
Yes.
they saw it is as the tower, where they were building the tower, was it was their elevation to become close to godness as possible. It wasn't. You'll have what we know as in the Kabbalah. You have the 8 points or
Mhm.
the 8 elevations or 9 elevations, where you have human consciousness, and then you're trying to ascend that to in the spiritual realm. So the New Age, you'll see a lot of that. A lot of the people saying that we have to raise our consciousness, we have to go to another vibration. We have different religions still talking about it, where you have chakra points, Hinduism, Taoism, all those
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
You have even, you could say, Jehovah's Witnesses, where they talk about some of the things that they got from Messianic stuff, where Masonry, you can actually stem it directly from Babylon.
And that's exactly what kind of where I was trying to go, is that it's kind of interesting that those people were builders, similar to like If you know a little bit about the history of the Freemasons, but before that was the Masons, they were actual builders,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had this type of secret knowledge. And from my understanding, they know a lot about Babylon, and
Yep.
they worship pretty much the similar things. And it's just so funny that it's kind of like
Mhm.
these same throughout history, these still like shadow group still.
And not to get people confused, Masonry is very complicated because you have Freemasonry. What people see nowadays, you'll see people with the bumper stickers. You'll see people, quote unquote, doing good service, coming together, different religions. That's something, a key thing that people have to take note is that they accept every single religion right from the bat. They accept every single religion. They said you can worship that, this, or that. But yet, as you keep going on through the levels, you start seeing the truth of what they actually worship. But apart from that, Masonry is a fraternity within a fraternity. So what you see in the cover is not what it really is on the inside. So you'll have your 33rd degrees, and then after that follows on higher levels so that you can continue to find out wisdom. Because their stance is always you have to elevate your mind to attain that power or attain that level of consciousness. Because to them, the tower was destroyed. So they're just trying to rebuild.
and they're not sure. Are they? See, the confusion is that we sometimes, I don't know about you, but before I spoke to you, I literally was a believer that I thought it was a physical building
Mhm.
that they were trying to build. But the reality is that they're trying to be united in
Yep.
in a type of religion, or is it more of a conscious of
It's
thought?
it's
Or
what we have now that a lot of people know who study about the occult or conspiracies, which is the one new world order, or the new world order, where you have your Georgia Guidestones, which reads that there should be one world religion, there should be one world government, and that's what they're trying to establish. Period.
so in the time of Babylon or the time of Nebuchadnezzar, that was the reason. Because for those that don't know, God destroyed a
Mm-hmm.
physical building, right? But He also confused the language
Correct.
so that
He
there would
started to
not be
divide.
oneness in the sense of these people. Not that God doesn't want us to be united in love for Him, right?
It was a separation
It was-
from what they were doing because they were literally doing Satan worship at the time. It's like when Moses went up, and then they were starting to worship all together, and yet,
Mount Sinai, right?
yep, and then you have Moses coming down and seeing all this, what's happening. People always looked for a way, like, to see proof, and at the time things were completely open. So you had people doing these bizarre things, like you had what you see examples of Moses with the priests of the Pharaoh, that they're making snakes out of nothing. They're making the blood out of the river, things like that. At the time, magic was prominent. So you had people seeing all this proof, and then you had the people who were still believing during the days of Noah, the God, the one true God, but yet they were hidden in the shadows still, but yet still practicing or unleashing all this. So people were slowly starting to get influenced.
So the reason why the Tower of Babel was so significant in the separation and to exclude unity was because the unity wasn't around worshiping the true God. The unity was around worshiping Satan.
Correct.
So in when we hear things like New World Order, wanting a one world currency, like Bitcoin, trying to push this one world currency, one world government, uh, it's not necessarily because we're trying to make benefit for humankind, though it can be seem that way. It, so what you are saying, and I'm trying to interpret it for the people listening, is that the unity is going to be ultimately to unite us closer to our sin, to unite us closer to Satan and the pursuits that he has for us, versus, so like if we had all this stuff, one world government and currency and all that, but it was united under the banner of worshiping the true God, then but that's not the plan. That's not what we see in Scripture. That's not what is ultimately going to be executed. He's the one who's going to bring that down to earth. He's going to create that, because within ourselves, as we do it, we're trying to muster up within ourselves what we believe will ultimately be godliness. I think that's the issue, right? The issue is we're trying to create our own heaven, our own godliness, our own righteousness, and 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 even if we are successful in doing that here on earth, we are fall short of His glory, and we are doomed to judgment. We already been condemned. Jesus said, "You already condemned. I came to save you." So it's just kind of, I guess, further condemnation, or so, I don't.
I mean, a good example of, for those of you who are listening that don't have a clear idea of the Babylon that's trying to be formed or how Babylon would appear to be, is there was a movie with Vin Diesel. I don't know if you guys remember. It's exactly called
John's watched every Vin Diesel movie, so ask him.
Babylon
I'm not a
AD.
fan. You know?
Babylon AD. Anyone seen that?
No.
Babylon AD. He did. Oh yeah, I do remember seeing it, but I saw it once and it wasn't impactful, so I don't know the plot. I don't remember.
Well, in
I remember
Babylon
seeing
AD,
it.
they had their one religion.
Wasn't that a show? Babylon AD.
I'm not entirely
Okay,
sure.
yeah.
I haven't watched the show. But they had a movie called Babylon AD, and within it, they were supposed to see the coming of someone that was supposed to save them, which was a girl at the time. But they were all led by one religion. They were all led by one government at the time, and they were waiting for their savior. And it was supposed to depict, if I remember correctly, what the director said in an interview. He wanted to make it from the book, he wanted to make it more realistic to what he would read about in Revelations. So the girl was supposed to represent the coming of like Jesus, and she was going to destroy the system that was established for years. So unification, and within that, you see people. Even though there was supposed to be peace, there was supposed to be this government, you still saw a whole bunch of rampant sin, like humanity to its primal nature at its core. But yet people were supposedly happy all the time. But yet they followed their sin strictly to a T. Like they did whatever they wanted to.
So there. Okay, so let me bring it back, and I'll just give a brief recap to bring it back to what you just said.
Cause I'm
It-
I'm
it-
all over the place.
Okay,
I'm all over the
all right.
place.
Let me provide.
And
a
I'm
little-
on the show. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
Okay, I'm gonna speak for a little bit.
Please,
All right.
yeah,
All right. So in the Bible,
yes,
it describes Adam and Eve. There's a fall of man.
yes,
Right. Through the lineage of their sons, Cain and Abel, there's evil, there's rampant. In early in the scriptures, within I think the chapter 5, it already goes into the Tower of Babel. So Nimrod was already on the scene at this point. So there was blatant evil. There was in the Bible, if you can see how God hated that. So He destroyed that oneness, right? He destroyed the oneness of.
chapter 10, Genesis
Of-
chapter 10.
Okay, thank you. He destroyed that oneness, but the oneness was a system of thought, of magic, of just evil in the point of that they could be their own gods apart from him, right? So he destroys that, confuses the language. That's where we get the word Babel. You fast forward a little bit. Humanity did not get better. It got actually worse to
Yep.
the point where God, in the time of Noah, says there's no one good, not even one. And there's this pleading with Noah and God, and Noah saying to God, if there's only 10, okay, Noah, if there's only 10. If there's only 5, okay, if there's only 5. If there's only one, there's not one person, Noah. To the point where God decides, and it says in the Bible that he almost, it hurts him to the point where he almost wishes that he didn't even create humanity. But Noah was found righteous in God's eyes, him and his immediate family, his sons, and I think his daughters of his sons, and Lot, I think, which was one of his relatives. So God saves the remnant, right? Floods the entire world. Sodom and Gomorrah, which were just rampant homosexuality, rampant. It was not even about that, but just evilness continual, right? So he creates.
Yeah, Lot was not. That was different.
That was different. That was
Yeah,
after.
Well,
right?
only Noah and his children.
Noah
and,
and-
and
Noah's
his,
children,
and his
okay.
family. Noah and his family. That was it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And
Noah
then
came.
that comes
Lot
later
came
because
after with Abraham. Yeah.
exactly. So then you have Noah comes in later, and out of the lineage, Ham comes out, and then that's where Nimrod comes out.
Correct.
So you can see throughout history, this agenda is always there. Even at the Tower of Babel, you didn't even call it Babylon at the time. It was pre everything, right? So then Nimrod comes in the scene after Noah, and then
Correct. Yeah.
then we have this whole thing where the flood comes in, the remnant. And so we think that it's all good that God is thing, but out of the lineage of Noah comes this man named Ham, and out of Ham comes Nimrod, and this whole cycle comes in, and so it's like ever evolving. We can't get rid of this frame of thought, right?
Well, what
It's
you said, G, not to interrupt, you had said that it's kind of like, um, it's an ever evolving, like a kind of chameleon. This Babylon that we're talking about is not just the physical. Here is Babylon,
It's a thought process,
but
belief system.
correct, yeah, and it transcends into the Egyptian culture, and then it changed the Assyrian culture, and then Persia, and then Rome, and then kind of where it is today in modern day Babylon. Um, so it doesn't go away. It's not something that here are the ruins and Babylon was here and then it's no more. Kind of like the Canaanites and all these people. No, Babylon influenced all of that, and it just like continues even when a nation has dominated. So like when Assyria eventually took over, they like became Babylon. Like it wasn't that they now dominated this area.
The thought process was so instilled that
Correct.
everyone else just adopted what was
Correct.
previous.
Okay. Okay.
And even Nebuchadnezzar, you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Nebuchadnezzar comes way after. That comes 400 or 500 years later,
Right.
and he's still in the Babylon type religion. So
But I mean, that's why you have a lot of them that they keep going. So a lot of people like making the comparisons with the Greek and Roman gods, but it's because they adopted one from each other. So you'll see the similarities like Mercury with Aries and things like that. I have actually an excerpt from, it's called Unexplained Mysteries of Babylon, where it talks about they have something in the cuneiform tablet that they found talking about the story of the beginning of Babylon, where it says, long ago, right after the flood, a man named Nimrod emerged on the scene of history. His name means let us rebel. He led the founding of the first great civilization, Babylon. He led them to rebel against God. He had tremendous power, so much that he became a god in the eyes of the people. When he died, his wife Semiramis recognized that without him she might lose power herself, so she devised a clever plan. Semiramis was pregnant. She told everyone that the child in her womb was none other than Nimrod being reborn. So we see from the very beginning, it's the main thing that was said from the beginning that Satan instilled on Adam and Eve, which is rebellion against God. And since then, he led a whole belief system that you can become God.
so it's kind of like what we have now. So like modern society is just kind of like with that we talked about in the New Age, right? You guys talked about that, right?
Yep. So the whole premise of Babylon is not necessarily that it's a place. It's just like we were saying earlier. Babylon is a system. It's the founding of what we now know as the religious system. But now we see in this day and age where we were talking about how does it all fall down with the different religions and things like that, we have a lot of similarities where in the culture we have references in the Matrix. Matrix, if you look at the Matrix, it's huge in occult references, what a lot of people don't know about. We see things like, we were just discussing it before the episode, Star Wars. Star Wars stems from a lot of Taoist and Buddhism, things like that, all merging.
Buddhism. My boy says Buddhism. I remember in that one episode he kept saying Buddhism, and I was like, yeah.
Buddhism.
Buddhism. There you go.
There we go.
Buddhism
Buddhism.
is it's something else.
And like what we talked about in the New Age episode, where everything is falling to New Age. So we have essentially what a recent book that I read that I recommended to you guys, which was The Fall of America, The Rise of the New Babylon, which is
I remember
essentially
you
how
mentioning
America's like supposed to replace the Babylon that we see now. But we also see in Revelations that a Babylon's actually going to exist or be rebuilt.
Actually, I have it here, so I don't know if
Yeah.
you want me to
Do it.
into that.
Go.
So Revelation 17, This is the point in the Bible where John is writing after the saints have already been kind of martyred and everything like that, and the bowls of wrath are already kind of being placed on humanity. Chapter 17, Revelation. One of the seven angels who had seven bowls, came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her, the kings of the earth committed adultery, and inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things, and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore the testimony to Jesus. It's kind of crazy, man. So, Revelation, this has not yet happened. Okay, so this is something that is a prophetic thing yet to come, right?
Yep.
And the Bible is describing is that this woman is not a physical woman, right? It's a symbolic thing. It's not like a literal woman with a purple sash and a golden cup has something written on her forehead. It's this that same spiritual religion system, way of thinking, Babylonic system is now not only in operation, but she's dressed in purple. I don't know about if you know the color purple means it's
supposed to be like royalty.
royalty. So now she's in the position where all the saints are already been martyred. Now I run this. Now the system of thought, the Babylon mentality is now running it.
Yep.
And it's crazy that what's written on her forehead: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and abominations of the earth. And then verse 6, he says, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore the testimony of Jesus. So this is completely against. It's like two camps, right? You got the Abrahamic camp, like with Jesus and all that, and then you got this Babylonic. I keep saying Babylonic. I don't even know if that's a word. But this
Babylonian.
Babylonian frame of thought, and they're against each other, and we're fighting, and at the end, it's saying that this basically is like the system of thought that's running the world.
Well, I think that's part of maybe why the Jerusalem is attacked so much. Like there's so much scrutiny around Jerusalem because of its claims to be the people of God, the location that God put the people, and so on and so forth. And Babylon, as far as its physical location, has been destroyed. So its original location is gone, whereas Jerusalem, its original location, is still there. Like the people have been sustained, like God showing the world that my people, that you have the counterfeit, I have the legitimate. And this society is a real ancient society. Many ancient societies have come and gone, and we can study and replicate. But go to a real ancient society, go to Jerusalem. That is the actual ancient society that you can see that the history has been preserved, that the writings are there, people are interacting, they're living, they're well, whatever. And there's a lot of scrutiny, there's a lot of backlash, there's a lot of attacks on that area. And I think anytime you have a concentrated effort to destroy something in that regard, so you have the whole world wanting to destroy Jerusalem, like there's just upheaval of wanting to just destroy Jerusalem for whatever reason, it just rubs people the wrong way. And then you have the person of Jesus. You have Muhammad, you have Buddha, you have just so many other symbolic images representing different religions, yet the main concentration of attack is Jesus. And there and when you step back and you pull back, from that, and instead of going with the norm, you have to think, why is there so much attack on this one individual or this one location? Like the claims that are being made from both are so exclusive that it's forcing people to feel some type of way about it from a human standpoint. From a divine standpoint, we understand that it shakes up the spirit realm. And that's why, hey, if you're Buddhist, nobody's trying to knock down nothing. Nobody's trying to, dudes in pajamas walking around. Nobody's trying to go out and destroy the temples there. There seems to be a significant, stronghold when it comes to, those kinds of things. So
True, very true.
I mean, I have here a passage from one of the books that was written. What was the culture of Babylon like? It says the most famous innovation of ancient Babylonian culture was astronomy, which began as a study of astrology. They created stellar catalogs and a nearly perfect calendar, of which the Jews later copied. They were able to predict eclipses, which they believed announced dangerous or evil times. These systems were the scientific basis of all the mathematical and astronomic legacy of ancient Babylon, so they also helped bring on the mathematics. Ancient Babylon still figures in the future of the world. Many of the religious ideas of the Babylonians are still taught in many of today's religions. Astrology was held in high esteem in Babylonian society, much as it is today. The most important legacy that Babylon gave us was its role in the lives of the Jewish people. The Lord used Babylon as a tool to punish his people when they turned from him. The Bible also tells us that in the future the Lord will punish Babylon just as he did in the past. So, just as you described in Revelations, it is described in the occult that Babylon is supposed to rise again. So you had Saddam Hussein in 1980s start establishing secretly the rebuilding of Babylon, which is now known as close to where the Euphrates River is, but closer to Iraq. So the actual rebuilding. Because at the time of when the Antichrist, the actual literal person of the Antichrist, is supposed to set to rise, he's going to seat in Babylon. Once again, that's going to be the capital of the whole thing. And a lot of people keep asking, how is this going to happen? Or why is it going to happen? But that's where it's predicted to happen. Where originally,
I
where
always
it was
thought
formed,
that he was because he's going to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and
Yep.
sit on the throne. But you're saying that
his actual capital would be in Babylon.
okay.
Yes. But of course, he's going to try to surpass God and actually sit on the throne, just like in Jerusalem.
Wow.
And that's what we see Babylon infiltrating. So we have, like we've been discussing, the whole system. So it's in turn the rebellion of God, uniting, coming together, and rebelling against God. It's not necessarily, oh, let's come together, let's join hands, sing some kumbayas, and just say, hey, I love your religion, or coexist, where we see the bumper sticker. It's all about, like,
So in a sense, you said coexist, but if it's a new world order or new age where everybody is accepted, except for one group or two groups, then it's kind of going to what you were saying.
yeah, I mean,
is that
predominantly one group. One is a location, the other is a person. Because if you think about the Jews, and if you merge the Kabbalah, there's no issue. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
yeah, so
Jewish
it's
mysticism.
specific.
right. So the Jewish history is an issue, but you can't erase history at this point. So even the things that we talked about last week, where the story of the what was it? The ancient Sumerian tablets that were found, and they have Babylonian ties, and it talks about the replication between Jesus, the story of Jesus, and the mythology of that. The main difference is the historical evidence for Jesus and the pure mythology of the other story. Like that's always going to be the big premise. Like, and a lot of the writers and a lot of the his the people who make claims to say, well, you see, it's the same thing. This one has a torturous death. Jesus had a torturous death. Yeah, you can make the comparisons, but one has historical backing, actual historical backing with people, with locations, with verification, with written record. The other is a story and nothing more. In fact, as part of that story, going back to that resurrection story, and I'll get back to the other point, is the fact that this person, I think Ishkar, whoever it was that resurrected, or they're like the same. They resurrected over and over, like there was reincarnation and resurrection over and over. So it was a continuation. Jesus, it was clear. There's die once, then the judgment. And when I return, it's over.
So yeah, even to build on that, like if you just what you said. So if it's a reincarnation and it's something like found in every single religion, every single one, except Christianity, because in Christianity we were aware of the fallen state, but then Jesus comes. But then Jesus makes a statement: the only way to get to the Father is through me, by my death, by believing in my resurrection, my sacrifice for the redemption of sin.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot fit in that frame
Right.
of thought. So
the whole battle is there's a perfect God. You guys are not perfect. So if we broke it down simply, like I have a cup of coffee and we're just sitting here, I'm like, hey guys, there's this God. He is perfect in every way. And when he created us, we rebelled against him. We made ourselves his enemies. And every day as we live, we continue to prove that we fall short of a standard that he's created, which namely is himself. And as a result of us making ourselves his enemy, we have to pay for our crimes against him. But he loves us so much that he doesn't just do away with our sin. He actually makes payment for our sin, because there has to be a payment. He has to be a fair judge. So he has to judge righteously for the crimes that we committed. And so he does one of two things: either you are going to pay for your crimes, or he has a substitute to pay for your crimes. Just cling to the substitute, and you're good to go. Just like that. It sounds so simple, and it's like, oh, it's a no-brainer, no doubt. I'm going to cling to that. Oh, but by the way, when you do that, now you're going to get a new spirit in you, and it's going to change how you think, how you react. It's going to want you to be more like Christ, and now you're going to want to give your life to him. But it's not something that you muster up yourself. It's something that he triggers in you, and then it just kind of happens, and you pursue it, and now you're like confirming your election, and you do all this stuff, and you're just a different person, and people are gonna hate you because of it.
But I want
It's crazy.
It's kind of like what you were saying earlier. Like it's very specific, because even in the time, even in the time of Jesus, they hated Jesus, and they're all Jewish at this point. We're talking about just Jewish people. So there was what they would consider like a sect of that, but it was the followers of Jesus specifically. Is that
because the main issue, if we just look at the main thing, the main issue is that we want to be God. We want to be in control of what we achieve, like that Maslow's hierarchy or whatever. We want our self-actualization. We want that for ourselves.
Determine what we consider good.
Correct.
We set our rules.
Correct. But when we say somebody else is making that judgment, then it's like, whoa. But we have here's a solution. Like it's crazy because there is a clear solution, and then there's a history that follows, and it's so crystal clear. Then you have Islam. Islam is similar in some ways, radically different in everything else.
One thing, they don't believe in the fall of man, so they believe that they're inherently good.
There's inherent goodness, and you earn your salvation, so you don't need a substitute because you're inherently good. You can do good deeds, and he's going to owe you at the end. So you are in control. Your self-actualization is very much in line with Hinduism, with Buddhism. Like it's all the enlightenment type of thought process that you don't need God to pay for your penalty. So
and that's what the scholars continuously say. That's what stems for all the false religions, or the Babylon.
They're all there, right? And then one religion is here, yet that one religion is getting so much scrutiny, so much attack,
but if we
because
see
of the
time,
person.
Yeah. And if we see with time, it shows specifically, especially with that quote I just said, it said that they came together and he formed that religion. But at the time, there were still true believers of God. So you have people always just stemming or going away from what it's supposed
It's like
to be.
the time of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. Daniel was a true believer, the follower of God, but Nebuchadnezzar, he was not at home. He was in Assyria, right? And he's basically, I say, he making him and his friends are literally making a point to just follow God 100% in the midst of this Babylon type thought, Babylonic.
Babylonian.
You know, so it kind of goes to show you that
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
always going to be some hatred only towards.
But that's the thing, and I think that's the point that I'm getting to without consciously getting to it. But as you guys are talking, I'm getting there. Like it's perfect. Is that if in fact it's just a copy, there's no issue. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So if the story of the resurrection of Christ is merely a copy of this Babylonian story, then there is no issue with Jesus. Like there should be no combating because we can merge together.
Yes.
But the issue is that it's not a copy. It is independent. It is historically proven. It is carved out. God wrote it. That's where the problem is. That's where the crux of it is. It's not parallel. That's the problem. If it was parallel, no issues. If it was self-actualization, if it was a by works system, no issue. But it's not. It's not a rebellious version of the carbon copy. It's an entirely different thing. It is a clear distinction. And when you talk about the people of God, right? So we being the people of God, but us now, joining in through Christ. So now we are part of the lineage of Jesus, right? So we're part of the seeds of Abraham. But when you talk about like the location of Jerusalem, like that's where it becomes interesting as well, because now it's not just a carbon copy of this, it is its own thing. That's why there's so much attack. That's why, because it's so original. It comes from God himself. Now, I don't want anyone who is listening to be confused to think that the Jews are somehow now post Jesus like saved, like they're under the banner of righteousness through Christ. No.
But make this clear that in the book of Revelation, God does separate 144,000 specifically.
Correct.
So you can see that he does 12,000 of every single
The
tribe of representation.
preservation
So
of his people.
he still loves the remnant, but he always has a remnant.
That's what. Yeah, it's the remnant that we see. What is it? Elijah, where he says.
Yeah. With
There's 7,000. Like, I'm the only one. No, there's 7,000. A remnant that I preserved from myself.
Yeah.
It's essentially what God has always done. He's always kept the people from himself. Always has, even in the midst of turning away. But it's that originality that's the issue. So when you have you have these accusations from Zeitgeist and these other things that say, well, Jesus is just one of many, and it's just the fish, and it's just this. Even the thing with the bumper sticker and the fish and stuff, that's not Christianity. Biblical Christianity doesn't have bumper stickers. You know what I'm saying? Like that's man-made. So you can make the accusation of that, but I could throw it out because it has nothing to do with
Or
biblical
how
Christianity.
people usually go, like a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, like throwing out the cross and the stake and saying that, oh, you guys focus too much on the symbol.
In Scripture, like there's the execution, and then there's Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
I always wonder.
Yeah.
Like that symbol is almost like the Bible describes it. Cursed is every man that goes
Hangs
on
on
a
a
tree.
tree,
So
yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to curse. I can understand from another viewpoint
Correct.
that's the resurrection, but that doesn't symbol resurrection. That symbols his death. I thank God for his death, but
Yeah.
I thank God for more. We talk about a resurrection
Yeah.
is the power.
Yeah.
Without the resurrection,
But I mean, you
there's
have those people that defend it by saying that they're carrying the cross, like they're carrying the cross daily and dying daily.
That's the same as someone saying I'm touching the Bible when I enter my house and I touch the Bible.
I'm touching the Psalms and I'm good to go. Remember Ivan? What was his Religion Man. So Religion Man, Ivan, shout out to Ivan. I loved and I don't know who it was in our group that had said it. I don't know if it was somebody, but I remember him saying it where somebody had given him a cross, or somebody was like had a cross, and he looked at it and he's like, yo, my man, because it had Jesus like on there. He's like, yo, I don't know if you know, but he's no longer on the cross. Like when he said that, I just love that he said that, and I was like, yo, it's so true. We have this symbol of that, but he's not there. He's ascended. He is reigning. Angels are surrounding him, just like
Or
glory,
he's no
holy,
longer a
holy,
baby.
holy. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like he's not an infant. He's reigning. He's the book of Revelation. He's dressed in white and he's coming and he's, you know what I'm saying? Like King of King, Lord of Lords, just speaking and bam, power. Like it's different than the imagery that we are imposing, that we create. We create the bumper stickers. We create the charms, because that's what it is. It's the charm. And my boy G can tell you all day about charms. You don't want no charms on you. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're rocking a cross, I'm not saying, you know, whatever. I'm just saying, like, think about it. Just think. Take a step back and think.
Why are you doing it, period?
Right. If it's a reminder, if it's good, fantastic. Continue that.
Because it could turn bad real fast. An example of it is Solomon, where he was a good God-fearing man, and then as he had wives come in and he started developing the system, even though he knew or had all this wisdom, and at the end of the day, where he left all that behind, he just said, "It's all about God. Everything else is vanity."
Yeah,
Right.
Ecclesiastes, shout out.
Right. So, you know, whatever activity we're involved in, and again, we're not trying to be legalistic here, but any activity you're involved in, if you rock the cross, you rock the bumper sticker, do your thing, just make sure you have a stance on it, because you're going to get backlash. And there's these small things that can throw people like way off their faith. And even,
When
you
you
know,
start apologetics, that's something
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's the thing, you know, speaking to the Hebrew Israelites, you go down there, these dudes are studied up, they have all these books, and if you don't have, if you're not like grounded and be able to follow the system, and you're like, hold on, wait, time out, you can identify what's true and what's false. And if you don't know, pull back, do research, take a moment, take a breath. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to, like last week, that's why when G had brought up the thing with the, you know, from the resurrection, I didn't know too much about it, so I was like, I had to pull back. I was like, I can't even comment because I need to understand. And after I read it, I said, now I get it. But I had to read up on it. I had to learn, because let's say we were in that context where he just threw that at me, and we're in the street. He just threw that at me. Boom. If I'm not strong in my faith, if I don't trust in the Lord, that would have thrown me off to be like, yo, is the resurrection real?
And
Like, question my faith
we
in a
would
heartbeat.
question that a lot when we first started, or when I was throwing stuff at you hardcore, that you called me like at 2 a.m. for like those talks we used to have, because it's tough. Like, I remember I would go on forums and I would have like Muslims debate me, or I'll have atheists say, "Oh, what about like you're doing birthdays? Birthdays is not Christian, or the crosses and stuff like that." Yeah, and I was just like, hold on, let me take a day, let me research, and then I'll come back to you, because that's what we don't do. We try to automatically just say, "Oh, the Holy Spirit is going to give me the words right then and there," which I'm not saying it's not going to happen. But sometimes the Holy Spirit is telling you, you got to read up. Like, you have to prepare yourself. Paul didn't just go and just say, "Hey, I'm going to just talk to the Greeks." He actually stayed with them, learned what they believed, studied up as well, and then just started debating them, going head to head with the people.
And within, even in that, when you see in Acts 17, as he's talking to people, some people walked away. And some people followed him. They wanted to talk more, but just because the people walked away doesn't mean they weren't thinking about it. Doesn't mean that they didn't do research. Doesn't mean that they weren't challenged and maybe later on, you know, converted. And it doesn't mean the people that walk with Paul drew near to God. That doesn't mean that either. You know, and I think, when we get into debates with people and we start to get backlash, some people argue for argument's sake.
Yep.
And Ravi Zacharias, I remember he was doing a lecture and he said something along the lines of, you know, some people just, ultimately, you're not going to reason someone into belief in Jesus, because the evidence is clear. It's not an evidence issue. It's a sin issue. It's a heart issue. So for people to come to Christ, it's a supernatural work of the Lord revealing himself to that individual, and the response is necessary, right? But at times I think we put too much of ourselves on the discussion, the argument. Some people just want to argue for argument's sake. So you can have all the, I can have everything on point with you, boom, 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 systematic. I break it down for you, and dude's still like, sounds good, but I'm still doing my thing.
Kind of reminds me of like
Myself, like
No,
when I
no.
was young.
no, in times of Moses, like
Yes.
So through God and the staff, the seas are parted. This, I don't know about you, but if I'm walking through a sea that parts, I'm like, whoa, this is the real God. Moses goes into the mountain to speak with God for like 40 days or something like that, right? In the meantime, these people recreate the calf
Mm-hmm.
back to the Babylonians' frame of thought. They were God's people, but they allowed to be infiltrated the frame of thought. And as soon as Moses goes to the mountain to meet with God, they just completely rebelled because it's their frame of thought. We're battling a systematic thing. It's kind of like generation.
Mhm.
Like I know that a person that's 14 doesn't think like me. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. Like we were both humans, but we come from different frames of thought. So the problem is in the future that Babylon is a frame of thought, not a physical place, and this is what we're battling.
Well, that's where you said physical place. That's where, man. So the resurrection of Jesus was a bodily resurrection. And many of these thought processes out there, including because I guess Babylon is so used to being this non-physical place, right? It's a thought, it's a whatever. They're promoting Jesus' resurrection was spiritual. So as Christians sitting in church, listening to this podcast right now, believe that the resurrection of Jesus was a spiritual one. So the physical body doesn't matter.
And look at back to these.
But
people.
it was a bodily resurrection.
back to
just
these
in
I
case.
actually have some stuff about that.
Just in case.
Hold up, real quick. Back to these people. They just saw the biggest miracle. I don't know if you saw, but like the sea parted,
Mm.
and the physical miracle of that. And this dude is gone for a month and a half,
Whatever,
and
yeah.
it's by the time he comes back, he's coming back with the law. He's coming back with God's. He's gonna set up a kingdom. God promised them the land of Israel, milk and honey, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you're gonna have your own place. Your own place. They weren't established yet, but it doesn't negate the fact that they went through that miracle. They saw the evidence, but even in the midst of that, the frame of thought was more powerful.
Well, let's go even back before that. How many miracles did they see before that? The preservation of the firstborn.
So if they come from a thing of magic, then they, of course,
Yeah.
that's you turn that thing to snake. But the last one is what got them when he kills all the firstborn.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, firstborn. You had.
So
all
God
these things.
God is always separating himself. Even in the times of Jesus, there probably was a lot of mysticism at that point. That's why they're like, "Who's this Jesus? He's doing himself." But hold up, he raised somebody. What was the thing that sentenced Jesus to death? He raised Lazarus, his homeboy, after 4 days. Because they knew after 3 days or whatever they believe. But after 4 days, he comes back to life, and they were like, everybody's gonna believe in the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Everybody's gonna believe in Jesus. We gotta kill him. So it's not the miss, even when they say, "What miracle are you gonna Jesus?" The Pharisees are talking to Jesus. "What miracle are you gonna show me that I may believe?" He's like, "What are you talking about? The fact that you don't know, you can't change your frame of thought. You can't even see what I just look at all the miracles you're doing." He says, "Out of all the miracles that I've done, which of these are you sentencing me to death?" He goes, "We don't sentence you to death. We know you're not the Son of God." So it's kind of like that. Like we're battling, bro. It's two frames of thought.
But I mean, isn't it like I believe it was Thomas when Jesus revealed himself to Thomas. It said
Mm.
specifically Jesus revealed himself to Thomas.
Mm.
So it wasn't like Thomas was seeing Jesus, but Jesus revealed himself, and that's when he touched him and everything. And he was just like, "My Lord, my God."
Well, in that particular verse, it doesn't even say he says go ahead, and he doesn't even put his fingers in. Like there's the preaching that says he puts his finger in, but when you read the verse, he doesn't put his finger. He doesn't test it to be like, oh cool, oh my finger went in. He says go ahead and put your finger in my wounds, and he just worshiped. But exactly right, he had to reveal himself to him.
Or when you talked about last time, the people that were walking 7 miles with Jesus last week, we were talking about that.
Didn't even see him.
We're talking about the ascension after he gets
Right after he rose and the resurrection, and the people walking back, and they're talking about everything that happened.
And I like
Jesus
Matt
pulled up to
Chandler's
them.
sermon about
Yeah.
that. 7 miles.
7 miles. 7 miles. And it's important, just all these small details that you kind of get out of it. The resurrection being a bodily resurrection, you know, the you know, the chronological order of things, the, you know, just it's we get so confused because we're easily deceived, and we want to be deceived. And using Israel as an example is exactly that. Like, no matter how many miracles we see, no matter how many prayers are answered, that's why throughout all of the Old Testament, God is telling the people, don't forget what I did for you. Tell this story to your children and grandchildren. Like, you have to remind yourself all the time. Like you said, the sea opened. Yeah, they saw so many miracles before that happened. And while they're walking through the wilderness, God's providing them food from heaven. Their shoes are not being worn. Like, their shoes are being preserved. Their children getting bigger and all, and they don't have to change out shoes. Like, it's just, it's fine. Like, God doing all these things and then being witness to it. But after a while, you become numb to it. You're just like, all right, God, you know what I'm saying? I know you did all this for me, but shrug
They
your
wanna do
shoulders. Yeah, what else you got for me? What else you got? What else you got? And God's saying, remember what I did for you. And we want, what else you got? What else you got? What else you got? What else you got? We're never satisfied. We're never going to be satisfied.
But I mean, that's why he also does the warning, and it continuously tells his people turn back, because after a moment, they keep asking, and then they see that God's not giving them that, or they'll just be like, I could do it myself. So they'll just like completely disregard and go their own way. So they'll build that calf, or they'll follow that idol, they'll follow that religion or belief system to feel that or fill that hole, even though they still have that God-filled hole in their heart.
And I want to make this clear, just to finish the story. God opens up the earth and destroys those people in one, altogether in one day. So, God, there is a punishment for this particular frame of thinking that we see even in Revelation, that the whole world is going to be mesmerized in this thought process. They have no choice but, no wonders there's going to be persecution against what you were talking about. It's so different. Christianity is so different, so set apart
Yeah.
from every other thought.
Yeah.
They have no choice but to get rid of you, you know?
Have to with perfection. I don't know if you want to play a quick clip of the thing.
No, it's not.
You wanna-
Because I read that.
Got you.
exactly
Okay.
Revelation.
So check him out when you get a chance. But very important. Remind yourself every day. Be so in tune with the reality of your position in Christ. If you are a Christian, preach the gospel to yourself always, every day. You know, we forget it. I forget it. You know, get caught up very easily and entangled in in what the world has to offer, and being enticed by the different forms of idolatry that arise in my heart. You know, John Calvin says the heart is an idol factory, and I'm guilty of creating idols within my heart and all the time and having to catch it. And so remind yourself, preach the gospel to yourself, get in your word every day, pray, get around other believers so that you're not deceived. And that's what this world is really out to do. And we are in this world, right? So before we were in Christ, we were part of that culture that was deceiving others because we ourselves were deceived. But because God in his mercy has revealed himself to us, now we can see. Now we have eyes in which we can see. And that should give us so much enthusiasm. That should give us so much grace to other people. Not be Christians that are walking around and you know, oh, look at him and I'm wearing nice clothes and all. Like, no, it should be opposite. We should be totally full of grace and wanting to love on people, to serve people, to preach the gospel, which is good news. It is good news that we don't have to pay the penalty for our sin. It is fantastic news that that although we were under condemnation, there is a substitute. He is the one who is going to bear our burdens. He's the one who has taken it upon us, and that he gives us justification. He justifies us even while we were in our trespasses and our sins. Like, that's good news. Share that. Be confident in sharing that. You're going to get turned away. I turned myself away from sharing that good news, but it's good news. And so be encouraged with that. Stay in your word, love on people, and And real quick, I had one of the high school kids. Um, when I was talking about, what careers does everyone is looking to do and all that, and he was in the back and he had a hat on and he was slumped down in his chair, just mad quiet. He had a full beard, like full beard. I thought it was like a grown man in the back, and he was like, "I'm gonna be a pastor," and I was like, and I don't know why I probed him. Like in the school, I'm probing him. I'm like, so what's the purpose? Because that's what we're talking about, the purpose. And he's like, "Cause I'm called." I was just like, fire, that's what's up. So I pulled him out afterwards when everybody was leaving. I told him, I was like, look, man, are you willing to don't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like being a pastor is not a career choice; it's a calling. So are you willing to love and serve people, even if that means you're working a full-time job, 9 to 5, whatever it is, and then you're serving the people as a pastor? He looked at me dead in my eyes. He's like, yes. I was like, do it then. Do it. Do it. And he like gave me a dap, had a big smile on his face and stuff. Um, but that's encouraging to see, like, this generation, for one kid and all those to say that, like, yeah, that gave me so much energy for the rest
The one
of
you
the day.
didn't expect, right? It was like
Yo, the one who was in the back slumped down with a full. I'm talking about full.
maybe
beard,
he was
bro.
bored because you were talking about careers, and he was like, "I already know.
I'm already
I already,
called.
I already
son.
know what I'm
Well, it was
doing."
like the end of the day. It was like after lunch. He's like, probably recovering, got diarrhea or something. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like he's recovering.
Covered for that public school lunch.
public, public school lunch, public bathrooms. You know what I'm saying? But that's it. That's all we got. Any last things you wanna drop in there, G?
Nah, man, I'm good.
All right, that's what's up. So check us out. Check out all of our platforms: SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Listen to us, promote us, help us out. The name of that channel is called again. The video.
Fuel Project.
Check out Fuel Project on YouTube. Get your apologetics up. But we're signing out. Love you guys. Mike